For 13 years, I built his construction empire with my own hands, late nights on muddy sites, saving million-dollar contracts, carrying the company when no one else could. I thought my loyalty would mean something. But when the empire finally hit its $2 million milestone, I was erased in front of everyone. He gave my place, my VP seat, to his daughter, and that's when everything began to crack. They replaced me with his daughter in front of everyone, after I spent 13 years building his $2 million empire brick by brick. That's not an exaggeration, it's the whole ugly truth, and the sound of the applause that day still rattles in my skull like a loose beam in high wind. My name is Mariana, and I was more than his right hand, I was the damn scaffolding. I joined him when his company was nothing more than a rented trailer parked beside a muddy lot and a half-broken skid steer. Back then, we were nobodies bidding on scraps. I was the one who pulled all-nighters drafting estimates by hand, who drove across the state to beg suppliers for credit, who tied rebar until my palms blistered because we couldn't afford another pair of hands. I watched that skeleton of a company grow into a steel-boned empire. I brought in the clients, I calmed the inspectors, I renegotiated when the banks threatened foreclosure. And every time we finished a project, whether it was a modest school gym or the Riverside Tower, he took the bow while I stood at the edge of the stage, smiling like a loyal soldier. I told myself my turn would come, that loyalty mattered, that blood wasn't thicker than sweat. But on that Monday morning, in the boardroom overlooking the skyline I helped pour into existence, he handed the keys of the kingdom to his daughter, Ava. She arrived late, heels clicking, perfume wafting like a luxury store opening, and all the senior staff turned to her as though she were royalty. She hadn't so much as filled out a change order in her life. Fresh MBA, no scars, no sleepless nights pacing sites after midnight pours. "Meet your new vice president of operations," he announced with a smile so wide it might have been carved in marble. The room erupted into applause, polite but hollow, the sound of people clapping because they knew paychecks came from his hand. My name wasn't mentioned. My years weren't acknowledged. Instead, he threw me a bone. "Mariana will continue to handle logistics." Logistics. That's what you call someone who keeps planes in the air while others take credit for the flight. Ava tapped her tablet and launched into a speech that sounded like she'd swallowed a business textbook. Stakeholder cadence, optimizing scalability, leveraging synergy. I glanced around the table. The veterans, project managers who knew what a bad cure looked like, superintendents with 40 years of dirt under their nails, kept their faces blank, but I saw it in their eyes. Disbelief, disappointment. The realization that this wasn't about competence anymore. It was about bloodlines. I kept my expression neutral, even when he looked at me, expecting me to smile like a proud mentor. And I did smile, but not for him. I smiled because in my pocket was the truth. Riverside Tower, our $2 million crown jewel, was a ticking time bomb. The lab results didn't lie, compressive strengths trending dangerously low, supplier substitutions buried in small print, 7-day breaks that already looked like a confession. I had the emails, the signed delivery tickets, the late-night messages from engineers panicking quietly. "Mariana, you're the only one catching this." He didn't know it, Ava didn't care, but I did. And that knowledge was my weapon. The meeting ended with champagne toasts and hollow cheers. He lifted his glass, looked right past me, and said, "To legacy." Legacy. The word tasted like ash. I clinked glasses anyway, because that's what survivors do when the wolves are circling. They keep smiling until they can sharpen their knives. "Congrats," I said to Ava as we waited for the elevator. "Welcome to the rebar jungle." She laughed, not realizing it wasn't a joke but a warning. As I left, Joel, one of our oldest iron foremen, caught me in the hall. "This true," he muttered. "She's running ops now?" I nodded. His jaw clenched. "Damn shame. Thought you were the one." I shrugged, smiled, and said, "Thought so too." He spat into the trash can like the taste had gone sour and walked away shaking his head. Outside, the wind off the river hit me hard, snapping my hair across my face. I checked my phone. The lab tech had sent me another update. 28-day breaks trending 12% low. Strong recommendation. Halt poor. My pulse quickened. They wouldn't stop. Ava was too eager, he was too blind, and the clients were too impatient. They would pour. And when they did, physics wouldn't care about legacies. Concrete either holds or it doesn't. That night, I drove past Riverside. The cranes loomed like skeletal giants, floodlights slicing the dark. I parked and walked the perimeter, boots sinking in the mud, watching workers moving like ants on the slab. A guard recognized me, waved me in, no questions asked. "Thought you left," he said. "Not yet," I lied. I stood at the edge of the south podium, my flashlight beam catching hairline cracks spidering across the surface. My chest tightened. The whole weight of the future sat on those cracks. I took photos. I logged details. And I felt something shift in me. For 13 years, I had been the one who saved the company from itself. Now, I realized I didn't have to anymore. Let them pour bad concrete. Let them smile for the cameras. Let them hand their empire to someone who thought hashtags were the same as hard hats. I wasn't going to carry their mistakes on my back again. When I returned to my apartment, I pinned the photos above my desk. Next to them, I tacked my pay stubs, thin and unimpressive compared to the profits I had generated. I stared at them until the sun began to rise, and in that pink light a thought crystallized. Stop building for them. Start building for you. The next morning, Ava posted a photo on the company's Instagram, her in a white hard hat, manicured nails, clutching a coffee cup, captioned, "Girl bossing the poor." My phone buzzed with Joel's text, "Blankets didn't arrive. Frost last night. You know what that means." I closed my eyes. I did know. Delamination. Weak surfaces. A future lawsuit baked into the foundation. And when it happened, they would look for me to fix it. But I was done fixing. I walked to the window, looked at the skyline I had built, tower after tower rising against the sky, and whispered, "Let them learn the hard way." For the first time in 13 years, I felt light. Not angry, not broken. Free. And that was scarier and sweeter than anything else. The email hit every inbox in the company at 7:03 a.m. Subject line: Celebrating legacy, embracing the future, and by the second sentence, I knew exactly how my story was going to be written without me. After 13 years of remarkable service, Mariana will be transitioning into a supporting role to ensure continuity as Ava steps forward to lead operations. Supporting role. Transitioning. Not a word about the midnight rescues, the million-dollar savings, the times I had patched disasters with nothing but grit and duct tape. Just a perfumed obituary for a career still breathing. I read it 3 times, the anger building like heat trapped under concrete blankets. Then I hit reply all and attached the Riverside Tower test results, compressive strengths trending 12% below design. Supplier signatures that didn't match the batch reports, a recommendation from the lab to halt all south podium pours immediately. My note was clinical, not bitter, attached for review. Strongly advise holding schedule until anomalies are resolved. I pressed send and closed my laptop because if they wanted legacy, let them inherit liability. By lunch, Joel called me from the job site, his voice ragged over the roar of generators. "They poured anyway, Mari. Blankets weren't here, frost hit hard last night. You know what that means." I did know: delamination, surface cracks, hidden weaknesses that would haunt every floor stacked above it. Ava signed it off herself, he added, spitting the words like nails. Smiled for the camera while the slump test failed. My chest tightened, not with guilt but with a dangerous kind of clarity. For 13 years, I had been the insurance policy, the invisible net catching their free falls. But now? I didn't have to catch them. I didn't even have to try. That evening, I walked the site one last time, the skeletal cranes lit against the cold sky, concrete steaming in the floodlights, and felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. A security guard waved me through the fence, no questions asked. "Thought you left," he said. "Not yet," I answered, though in truth I already had. My flashlight beam slid across the fresh slab, catching hairline cracks spidering like veins, shimmering frost still embedded in the surface. I snapped photos, each one proof that physics, not bitterness, would do my fighting for me. The next day, Ava posted a photo of herself in a hard hat, latte in hand, captioned, "Girl bossing the poor." My phone buzzed with Joel's text. 28-day breaks will fail. I'm telling you, it's a coffin. I typed back, then let them bury themselves. By the end of the week, clients were restless. The Riverside rep requested an unscheduled site visit. Ava, in her spotless jacket and borrowed confidence, gave a chirpy tour while I stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching the client's eyes track the cracks he wasn't supposed to see. He didn't say a word to me then, but 2 hours later an email landed in my personal inbox, not company, personal. Mariana, we trust you. Please confirm your concerns privately. My fingers hovered over the keys. I could have sent the full report then and there, detonated the empire in one click. Instead, I sent a single sentence. I recommend you commission an independent audit. That was enough. Meanwhile, inside the office, morale was fracturing like the Riverside slab. Subs stopped answering calls. Vendors started demanding payment up front. The electricians sang a parody of a safety jingle, changing the chorus to "Nepotism pays the bills." Rumors spread through breakfast diners where foremen traded gossip over black coffee. The daughter's running ops now, they said, shaking their heads. The real boss? Gone. By the second week, my phone started buzzing with a different kind of message, former colleagues asking if I had room on my bench. Joel left me a voicemail. Wherever you're going, take us with you. We don't want to pour for liars. I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I drove past a warehouse I'd passed 100 times without noticing, sagging roof, faded sign, a chain-link fence leaning tired against the sidewalk. I stopped, killed the engine, and stared through the dusty windows. It was nothing. It was perfect. In my mind I saw desks lined with drawings, a wall covered in pinned schedules, a team who trusted me not because of my bloodline but because of my backbone. I scribbled in my notebook a name I hadn't dared speak, Ellison Build. Not his name. Mine. That weekend, while Ava posed for glossy marketing shots in her hard hat, I rented the warehouse month to month, bought a battered old plotter off an online auction, and printed my first letterhead, Ellison Build, integrity is load-bearing. I tacked it to a corkboard on the peeling wall and laughed, a little wild, a little free. I told no one who could run back to him. I posted nothing online. But in construction, word doesn't need a press release, it travels faster than rebar rusts. Within 3 days, 2 subcontractors left him cold and showed up at my warehouse with a 6-pack and a handshake. Within 5, a school district emailed asking if I could bid a gym renovation, a project Ava had already botched with inflated estimates. By the 6th, the Riverside client called me directly. We've commissioned the audit, he said flatly. Would you be willing to consult, off the record? My throat tightened, not with fear but with something hotter, vindication. That night, I stood alone in the warehouse, blueprints spread across the dusty table, the sound of rain dripping through the roof, and felt my pulse settle into a rhythm I hadn't known in years. They thought they'd erased me, replaced me, buried me. Instead, they'd freed me. And now, with their empire already cracking under its own arrogance, I had the one thing stronger than titles, stronger than applause, stronger than legacy. Proof. Proof of what I'd built. Proof of what they'd broken. Proof that when concrete fails, it tells the truth, and so would I. The first job I signed as Ellison Build wasn't glamorous, but it was oxygen. A middle school gym with showers that smelled like mold and lockers so rusted the hinges came off in your hand. And when the principal handed me the keys, his eyes were skeptical but desperate, the way clients look when they've been burned before. I promised him nothing flashy. Just that the job would be finished on time, on budget, and built like it was meant to last 100 years. Joel showed up on his day off, with 6 ironworkers, claiming they just wanted to see the new shop, but by the afternoon they were sweeping floors, checking scaffolds, and yelling at suppliers like they'd never left. We had no polished equipment, no glossy trucks, just borrowed tools and grit, but when that first shipment of block arrived and I cut the wrap with a box cutter, it felt like cutting a ribbon on my own future. The nights were long, the days longer, but the rhythm of honest work was sweeter than any boardroom applause. There was laughter in the dust, jokes traded over lukewarm coffee, and for the first time in months, I felt alive instead of erased. But construction is never just about bricks, it's about whispers. And whispers about me were spreading faster than concrete sets. Vendors started calling, asking if I had projects they could bid on. Subcontractors slipped me notes on job site lunch tables. Where you go, we go. Even the city inspector, a man who once terrified me with his clipboard, leaned in during a walkthrough and said, "Glad to see you on your own feet, Mariana." About damn time. Each word was fuel, but fuel burns fast, and beneath the fire was fear. Because I knew whispers reached him too. Sure enough, 3 weeks later, he called. His voice was syrupy, the kind he used when selling donors on sponsorships. "Heard you've been keeping busy, Mari. Little side projects." He paused, expecting me to stammer, to explain, to apologize. "Just building honest work," I said evenly. Silence stretched, then he chuckled like a man humoring a child. "Don't stretch yourself too thin. Legacy's a heavy load." He hung up before I could answer, but I didn't need to. I was already carrying something he couldn't lift: loyalty. My crew didn't work for a paycheck alone. They worked because they believed. And belief is heavier than concrete. The gym project finished 2 days early, inspection flawless, budget untouched. The principal shook my hand so hard my knuckles popped, then handed me a check that looked small but felt enormous. That night, we gathered in the warehouse with folding chairs and pizza boxes, and Joel raised a beer to Mariana, our real boss. Laughter roared, and for a moment I allowed myself a breath of relief. But relief is always short-lived. Because the very next morning, an email landed in my inbox with the subject line, "Request for Proposal, Transit Plaza Redevelopment." I froze. It wasn't just any job, it was a crown jewel contract, $15 million at stake, prestige that could make or break reputations. And it was already rumored that his company, with Ava smiling on every glossy rendering, was the frontrunner. I stared at the bid documents, heart racing. Competing against them meant exposure, risk, and war. But walking away meant staying small, forever in their shadow. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then I whispered to myself, "If they tried to erase you, Mariana, write yourself back in." The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and racing deadlines. We pored over drawings until our eyes ached, recalculated estimates with ruthless honesty, and built a bid package that wasn't just competitive, it was airtight. I refused to play their game of smoke and mirrors. No inflated schedules, no padded contingencies. Just truth. I knew the city council wanted more than pretty renderings. They wanted reliability. And reliability was the one thing I had in spades. Meanwhile, news trickled back about their bid. Flashy presentations, Ava parading in designer suits, promises so bold they bordered on delusion. But behind the curtain? Rumors of delays, suppliers pulling out, and, worst of all, whispers about Riverside's cracks. The audit report wasn't public yet, but enough people had seen fragments. Enough people were starting to doubt. Then came the pre-bid conference. He walked in first, tall, confident, shaking hands like a politician. Ava followed, hair glossy, smile rehearsed, tablet glowing with graphs she didn't understand. And then I walked in, my name badge reading Ellison Build, head held high. The silence was delicious. Some smiled, some whispered, some just stared. He saw me, and for the first time in years, his expression cracked. "Mariana," he said smoothly, "nice of you to join the big leagues." I smiled. "I've been here all along. You just forgot to look down." His jaw clenched, and I knew I had scored the first hit. The presentations were brutal. They dazzled with animations, drone footage, promises of completion months ahead of schedule. The council members nodded politely, impressed but skeptical. Then it was my turn. I didn't have slick videos or fancy suits. I had numbers, photos of past jobs, testimonials from subs and clients who trusted me with their lives. I spoke about integrity like it was rebar, unseen but essential. I showed photos of our gym project, ironworkers beaming, kids already practicing in the half-finished court. I ended with one line: concrete doesn't care about titles. It cares about truth. And that's what Ellison Build delivers. The room went silent, then erupted in applause that wasn't polite, it was real. That night, lying awake in my tiny apartment, I felt the weight of it all pressing down. The risk, the exposure, the chance I might be crushed under the very empire I had helped create. But under the fear was something hotter, anticipation. Because I knew the council had a choice to make. And whichever way they leaned, one thing was already certain. I was no longer erased. I was on the board again, and the next move was mine. The days leading up to the Transit Plaza Award were torture, the kind of restless waiting where even the air feels like it's holding its breath. My crew tried to distract me with jokes, pizza nights in the warehouse, even painting a crooked mural of our logo on the wall, but every buzz of my phone made my stomach twist. I knew the council's decision was coming, and I knew it wasn't just about a contract, it was about whether my name would finally replace the shadow he'd tried to bury me under. On the morning of the hearing, I walked into City Hall with my heart pounding louder than the traffic outside. He was already there, shaking hands with council members like he owned the place, Ava at his side, flashing that confident smile that came from never having been told no. I sat 3 rows behind, legal pad in hand, while they presented their final defense. Slick videos, promises of accelerated schedules, claims of flawless safety records. But halfway through, a man in a gray suit from Riverside stood up in the back of the chamber and cleared his throat. "Council members," he said calmly, "before you accept their bid, you should see this." My blood went cold. I hadn't planned this. He held up a folder, fat with documents, and handed copies to the clerk. Murmurs rippled across the room as pages were passed down the dais. I caught glimpses, photos of cracks at Riverside, lab reports with failing numbers, signatures that didn't match. Ava shifted uneasily, eyes darting to her father, who went pale under his tan. One council member tapped the microphone. "Is it true that the Riverside project has failed independent audit standards?" Silence. Then the gray-suited man said the words I'd been holding back for months. "The audit shows systemic negligence. At best, incompetence. At worst, fraud." Gasps filled the chamber. Ava tried to interject, but her voice wavered. He leaned forward, hands gripping the table, but the swagger was gone. "We are addressing it," he muttered. Too late. The council members whispered among themselves, faces hardening. Then the chairwoman turned to me. "Ms. Ellison," she said, voice steady, "your bid claims a record of integrity. Can you confirm you've had no similar failures?" My throat went dry, but I forced myself to stand tall. "Madam Chair," I said clearly, "concrete doesn't lie." "Neither do I. Every project I've touched has been inspected, audited, and stood on its own strength. That's my legacy." The room erupted in applause, not polite, but raw, like relief. He slumped in his chair. Ava's hands shook so badly she dropped her tablet. And in that moment, the weight of 13 years lifted off my chest. But the storm wasn't over. News of the Riverside scandal spread like fire. By evening, headlines screamed, "Empire under investigation, $2 million project crumbling." Crews walked off sites mid-shift, suppliers froze credit lines, clients canceled contracts. His phone calls went unanswered, his emails bounced back with auto-replies. "This inbox is no longer active." Meanwhile, Ellison Build's inbox exploded, requests for bids, partnerships, interviews. Joel looked at me across the warehouse, eyes wide. "We're not just surviving, Mariana," he whispered. "We're winning." And yet, part of me felt a pang, not sympathy, but recognition. I had been the scaffolding holding that empire up. And now, stripped of me, it was falling in plain view of the whole city. 3 nights later, I drove past Riverside. Floodlights still burned, but the site was empty, cordoned off with caution tape. Inspectors in reflective vests paced the cracked slab, shaking their heads. I parked and watched in silence, remembering all the nights I had worked myself raw to keep that place alive. My phone buzzed. Another message from the council. "Congratulations, Ellison Build has been selected for the Transit Plaza redevelopment. Contract attached." I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. $15 million. Not just money, vindication, carved in legal ink. I forwarded it to my team with one line, "We did it." The replies came instantly, cheers, emojis, Joel sending a photo of beer bottles raised in the warehouse. I laughed until tears rolled down my face. But even in victory, tension lingered. That same night, as I left the site, a familiar figure stepped from the shadows. Him. His face was drawn, his suit wrinkled, the confident mask shattered. "Mariana," he said hoarsely, "we can fix this. We can fight the audit, restore trust. I need you." I looked at him for a long moment, the man who once called me the daughter he never had, who later threw me aside like scrap steel. "No," I said quietly. "You need integrity. And that's something you can't fake." I walked away, leaving him under the cold floodlights, a man watching his empire collapse, not from sabotage, but from his own arrogance. By the time I got home, my inbox was overflowing with congratulations, interview requests, partnership offers. The city was watching, and for the first time, they were watching me not as a shadow, not as an assistant, but as a builder, a leader, a name. Yet I knew the story wasn't finished. Because winning the contract was only the beginning. The real battle, the one that would carve my name into the skyline forever, was still to come. The morning after the council awarded Ellison Build the Transit Plaza contract, I woke to a silence so sharp it felt louder than any applause. For a moment I thought it had all been a dream. My name read aloud in that chamber, the shock on his face, the way Ava's hand trembled until her tablet slipped from her grip. But then my phone buzzed with messages stacked like dominoes. Congratulations from clients who had once ignored me, inquiries from journalists, offers from partners who suddenly remembered my number. Joel had already texted, "Warehouse is packed, boss. You better get down here." I pulled on my boots and drove, heart pounding, because victory is never clean. It's always tinged with the fear that the floor might collapse beneath you. When I walked in, the crew erupted into cheers, raising mugs of burnt coffee like champagne, and Joel slapped the contract down on the table so hard the dust leapt. "$15 million," he said, grinning. "Mariana, we're not just in the game, we own the damn board." For a brief second, I let myself breathe. But in construction, peace is just the quiet before the next hammer falls. By afternoon, the headlines weren't just about my win, they were about his collapse. $2 million Riverside project declared unsafe, empire under fire. Photos of inspectors pointing at cracked slabs plastered every newsfeed. Ava tried to spin it with an online statement about unexpected conditions, but the audit's language was brutal: systemic negligence, failure to meet industry standards. Clients pulled out overnight. Subcontractors refused to show up. Within a week, sites were ghost towns. I should have felt pity, but all I felt was inevitability. Because empires built on arrogance always crumble, it's just a matter of when. Still, he tried to fight. 2 nights later, he appeared outside my warehouse, tie loosened, eyes wild. "Mariana," he pleaded, "help me. If you speak for us, we can salvage Riverside, we can save the company." I looked at him. The man who once called me the daughter he never had, who then tossed me aside like scrap steel. "You don't need me," I said softly. "You need integrity. And you can't subcontract that." I turned back inside, closing the door on the ghost of the empire I had carried for too long. And just like that, the torch passed, not by his choice, but by consequence. The weeks that followed were the kind of chaos people write legends about. My team, once dismissed as strays, turned Ellison Build into a name the city couldn't ignore. We broke ground on Transit Plaza with every news camera in town pointed at us. The mayor shook my hand, reporters scribbled furiously, and my crew lifted the first steel beam like it was raising a flag. Clients lined up. Vendors offered better terms than I'd ever dreamed. Even the city inspector, once a terror, grinned as he signed off on our first pour. At night, when the site lights glowed and laughter echoed across the skeleton of the new plaza, I felt something I hadn't in 13 years. Not just vindication, but joy. Real, unshakable joy. Meanwhile, their empire dissolved in public view. Riverside was abandoned, lawsuits piled up, and creditors swarmed. Ava stopped posting glossy photos. The last one was a desperate caption about resilience in tough times. He vanished from sight, his name now whispered like a warning instead of a promise. And me? I kept building. I kept showing up with my hard hat, my crew, my truth. Because the city didn't just want structures, they wanted stories they could trust, and my story was carved into every slab we poured. But even victory has quiet moments. One night, long after the crew had gone home, I walked alone through the half-built plaza. The steel skeleton rose against the stars, floodlights buzzing, and I pressed my hand against a column, feeling the cool strength of it. I whispered, "This is yours, Mariana. Yours." My chest tightened, and tears came, not of anger, not of grief, but of release. 13 years of being invisible, erased, expendable, and now I was standing in the proof that I had been the backbone all along. The day we opened the gym project to the public, kids ran across the court, their laughter bouncing off the walls, and the principal shook my hand again, eyes wet. "You kept your word," he said simply. In that moment, I realized my empire wasn't just contracts and dollars. It was trust. It was integrity. It was building something that would outlast me. And that's the lesson, isn't it? Titles can be stolen. Applause fades. Legacy isn't about who's chosen in a boardroom. It's about who shows up when the concrete is wet, who tells the truth when it cracks, who refuses to cut corners even when no one is looking. He gave his empire to his daughter, but it collapsed because it was hollow. I walked away with nothing but my name, and I built something stronger because it was real. So if you take anything from my story, take this. Don't let anyone erase you. Don't let anyone tell you loyalty matters more than integrity. Build your life like concrete, honest, solid, unshakable. And if someone tries to take it from you, let physics, let truth, let time do the work. Because in the end, integrity is load-bearing. And when the dust clears, it's the only foundation that stands.